All right, I think we're at 11:31. Good morning to those that have joined us for this webinar today. Hello and welcome. This is a webinar from VMP eLearning, and it's focusing on green hydrogen, which is a significant opportunity for Queensland and Australia in this reach for sustainable energy. I've got with me Dr. Mike Irwin. I'm very pleased to be able to have him with us. He's very interested in hydrogen, has got quite a bit of experience across a broad range of information and technologies. Mike, I'll just get you to say hello quickly.
Hello, Ian, and hello, attendees.
Thank you very much. We'll come back to Mike soon, where we're going to answer questions and also have a discussion. But first, I wanted to throw to our Director of Education and Learning Strategies, Dr. Ruth Schwarzenbock, who has been talking to Mike earlier, and we've recorded this short video that will hopefully give an overview of the situation. I'll let that roll now.
Welcome, Dr. Michael Irwin. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. I'm very excited to hear everything you have to say and hear about all your experience and your insights into everything hydrogen. Could you please introduce yourself or give us a little bit of a background about yourself?
I'm formally trained as a scientist. I have a degree in chemistry and biology, a PhD in spectroscopy, lectured at university in chemistry, developed courses in chemistry for some universities. And then I had a series of my own businesses running analytical laboratories, software development companies. So, I've got science background and business skills, and I think one of my strengths is to bring business and science together. So since retiring, I started a not-for-profit called Hydrogen House Australia with the aim of promoting the use of green hydrogen for storage of renewable energy. And we're doing a bunch of projects, public-facing projects, policy development, advocacy to bring awareness in the public space, social license, and to contribute where we can to development of evidence-based policies to enable a hydrogen contribution to the renewable energy space.
How does hydrogen fit into the plan of focusing more on renewable energies?
So hydrogen is effectively a way of storing renewable energy. The obvious thing that we use to store energy is batteries. So if we can access renewable energy from solar or wind and store it in batteries, and we can save it up to renew it later. The big problem with renewable energy is that when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining, we're not producing it. So we need an effective way to store it. We need ways to store energy, and hydrogen offers some potential. It has its limitations, like every technology, but it has a lot of potential, and particularly in the areas of things like export. You can't send a whole lot of charged up batteries overseas to export the energy and then have them sent back when they're drained. For mobility, such as aeroplanes, if you load up an aeroplane with enough batteries to get it off the ground, it's not going to fly very far. So batteries are very inefficient at storing energy. Hydrogen is very efficient, but then it has some other issues in terms of storage and transport.
Can you tell me what is happening to develop the hydrogen solution?
When I first got involved with this, I was quite naive. I didn't think there was much going on. Certainly, I was sitting there quite frustrated that, the governments were talking about fossil fuels, to solve the problem of intermittent supply. Once I got involved, I found out there was a lot of work going on behind the scenes, and government was supporting a lot of projects. The Queensland government has a hydrogen minister, for goodness sake, like the minister of hydrogen. That's recognition of the role it's going to play in our future. And Australia is doing a lot of behind the scenes work on exporting and production and technology, but the public's not aware of it yet. So the public's starting to hear a little bit, we hear about hydrogen being mentioned, but there's still not a lot of public awareness of what hydrogen is, the role it might play.
So when we hear about hydrogen, it's often called green hydrogen. Could you please explain why the terminology green hydrogen and not just hydrogen?
Green hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced from renewable energy. So using solar or wind energy, which is sustainable or renewable energy, and using renewable energy to generate the hydrogen by electrolysis of water. So water is H2O, hydrogen and oxygen. If you put electricity into water, you can make hydrogen and oxygen. And if you make hydrogen that way, you call it green hydrogen. There's already a big industry in the world for hydrogen. Hydrogen's used to make ammonia for fertilizer and explosives, and it's used in refining of fuels. And that hydrogen is made from fossil fuels. So when you make the hydrogen, you also produce carbon dioxide. So, there's no point making hydrogen and producing carbon dioxide. What we're trying to do is get rid of the inputs from fossil fuels and putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. There are other processes where in the process of making hydrogen from fossil fuels, you can capture the carbon dioxide and sequester it, and that's called blue hydrogen. So people are saying, well, that's also a good process. Some people use the term clean hydrogen when they're talking about blue hydrogen, but it's a matter of how much carbon dioxide you're capturing and how much carbon dioxide is still escaping. So there's all these sort of areas where people are using terminology, to get away with less than 100% renewable hydrogen, so to speak. So there's going to be a big need for a lot of standardization, a lot of agreements between governments on, what is an acceptable level of carbon dioxide released in the production of hydrogen. And ultimately our aim is to have it, completely green, or you could produce it with nuclear energy, and in the short term, that's not putting any carbon dioxide in the air, because then you've got the whole argument about whether you want nuclear energy involved in the process. But certainly we've got to make sure that when we're producing hydrogen, we're not putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, or we're defeating the whole purpose.
So it sounds like there will need to be training implemented, but what kind of training will be required in the shift to more renewable energy?
Well, training's a big question. There's estimates that we'll need a workforce of over 1 million people just in renewable energy. That's across all sectors, of course, like capturing the energy, solar, wind. But in the hydrogen sector, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of jobs directly in the hydrogen sector, both in the domestic market and in the export market. There's a huge need for training of the new workforce. There's no sort of new jobs, it's all upskilling from existing jobs. So plumbers, will need to learn about the new skills or the new plumbing requirements for hydrogen. Tradespeople, legal people, financiers, the new terminology, the risks, safety, emergency and response teams. So there's a huge need for training the workforce of the future. So we need to have a national standard for education and curriculum there. Online training is just part of life these days. It gets the information under your nose quicker, allows quicker and cheaper delivery, I guess.
And what sort of training do you think will be most effective to engage the young people and those early in their careers?
Certainly there's some interesting programs around. I've seen some programs where school children build little hydrogen-powered race cars, and they actually have races with them. They're designing them to be competitive, so that gets them excited. I think it's a matter of just making them aware of what all the opportunities are, and they'll find something that they like. There's technical jobs in the trades, there's engineering, there's planning jobs, there's policy jobs. So different people are, marketing, different people are spurred on by different things. So I think it's just a matter of highlighting where the opportunities are in relation to hydrogen in all those different aspects of potential careers. And then they could say, there might be a role for me in the hydrogen economy in this area or that area.
Well, here at VMP eLearning, we endeavour to use a wide variety of techniques and technologies to ensure there's always something interesting to grab a learner's attention and interest.
But I think online training has a very good role in specific skills training. So when it comes to, someone might be a plumber or an electrician or a, emergency worker, and they've already got lots of skills. They're the broader skills that they've had to build up through their certificates or their degrees. but they may need some very specific training in how to install a particular device. And I think things like online training are very useful for those types of tools.
Yes, I agree. Short, micro-credentialed and well-structured online courses can be really effective in not just teaching the new techniques, but also reinforcing and assessing to ensure the knowledge has been well established in the learner's memory. But on hydrogen, what do you see is the key benefit outside of the big need for renewable energy?
You know, hydrogen offers the potential that you can have a fill station that looks just like a petrol station. Right now, there are cars running around with gas in their tank. So LPG is in the back of a lot of taxis. A lot of taxis have gas tanks in the back. They pull up to the fuel station, they plug it in, just like the gas that goes in your barbecue. You squirt it in and the car's refilled in 5 minutes, just like refilling a petrol car, and off you go. So hydrogen can do the same thing. Hydrogen can be used to refuel a car in 5 minutes. I don't see hydrogen having a huge role. I think electric cars make much more sense for short haul trips around. But for things like ships going across the ocean and aeroplanes in the sky and long haul trucks and locomotives, the hydrogen may have a significant role to play.
So I think one of the confusing areas for hydrogen is the amount of options. So you touched on that before, but why the rainbow of hydrogen colors?
Well, hydrogen is hydrogen. Hydrogen is a basic element, but there are different ways you can produce hydrogen. And so names are being given to the hydrogen that's produced by different means. So we'll hear the term green hydrogen. And green hydrogen is hydrogen that's produced by using renewable energy and hydrolysis of water, so that basically you're just producing hydrogen and oxygen. There is grey hydrogen, and that's the hydrogen that's currently produced from fossil fuels. And we're not interested in grey hydrogen because by producing it, we're producing fossil fuels. And the energy we get from the hydrogen doing that, we may as well just burn the fossil fuel like we're doing now. So our aim is to produce hydrogen without putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So you can produce hydrogen from fossil fuels and then capture the carbon dioxide that's released at the time, and that's called blue hydrogen. And there are people trying to get that process working efficiently. You can produce hydrogen from hydrolysis of water using nuclear energy as your source. I think that's called red or pink hydrogen. There are different names coming up all the time. There's a generic name that I think people with vested interest like to use, which is called clean hydrogen. And that's a way of sort of hiding some of these other processes, where you're so-called capturing the carbon dioxide, but not necessarily efficiently. So there's going to be a need for standardization of, at what point do you consider the production of hydrogen to be sustainable in terms of the impact on climate and carbon dioxide production.
So to me, it sounds like there's a real need for a framework and regulations and training around the production of hydrogen.
Yep, and certainly important in policy making and legislation and world trade. I mean, once you got hydrogen in a bottle, you don't know how it was made. So there's going to be a huge amount of work needed in just the provenance. How was this hydrogen made and what's the certificate attached to it? Just like now, you buy electricity, electrons come down the line to your house. You don't know whether they were made from solar energy or wind energy or fossil fuels. You don't know. The only way you know is because there's a chain of certificates that go back to the originators. And so if you buy renewable energy from your electricity provider, they have to, buy some certificates from someone that made it, from renewable sources. Same thing's going to have to happen with hydrogen, because once it's in a bottle, there's no way of telling how it was made.
That's a really good point. Once it's in a bottle, we won't know how it was made. So there's plenty of work to be done in the areas of training and legislation. I really want to thank Dr. Mike Irwin for talking to us today and offering some more insights into the need and potential for green hydrogen.
Yes, and I'd like to reinforce that point. Thanks very much for joining us in that chat, both Ruth and Mike. And now we're back live to obviously extend that conversation a little bit and hopefully get some questions from the people that are joining us. I've got a few points from that conversation that really stood out to me. But I've also got a few people on board here and one of them I know is Tim Jensen, who's from Blue Logistics, the significant trucking operation, milk trucks in the southeast of Queensland, and has a number of other states. But Tim is about to launch some trucks in Tasmania as well, some hydrogen trucks, is working on that right now. And I think that's very exciting. One of the points that he made to me was that Tasmania is actually a sustainable state. Mike, you're across that, I believe.
Well, I'm not aware of Tim's specific project, but
No.
I'm certainly aware that. Well, sorry, you made me aware of it, but I haven't had anything to do with it specifically. But there may well be a Queensland provider of the refueling stations, because I'm working with another group that's been down in Tasmania installing a refueling station. Tim can probably say more about that.
Yeah, no, I understand there's a bit going on there. So I might get Tim to join us via the Q&A if that's feasible, to make sure that he's in a position to go live with us, and we'll actually speak to him directly if possible. But otherwise, we can do it via the Q&A, and I'll leave that with Natalie to make sure she can manage it. So yeah, what I meant there was that factor that Tasmania produces all of its electricity via renewable means, which I wasn't aware of prior to speaking to Tim about that.
Yeah, they actually even export some to the mainland, so it's fantastic.
Wonderful, yeah. So I think Natalie's going to make Tim's mic live, and he can give us a little bit more information about what's happening there with actual hydrogen trucks that will be on the roads in that state. You with us, Tim? He's with us, but just may not have the microphone sorted out.
Can you hear me there now,
Yeah,
Ian
yeah.
and Mike?
Yes, I can. Thanks, Tim. Yeah.
Thanks for the invite, and I really liked your talk there, Mike. It was interesting. Yeah, so we're doing a bit of work in Tasmania at the moment with a company called Countrywide Hydrogen, and they're looking to cover the state of Tasmania in hydrogen refuelers. And we're looking at some fuel cell trucks that we want to run in Tasmania through Hyzon. So we've done some prelim work with those guys, and it is pretty exciting too, because Tasmania is a bit of a captive state as far as road transport, that we can put refuelers across Tasmania and we can cover the entire state pretty easily. Whereas if we did, the states in Australia, we put one in Sydney and another one in Melbourne, we may not be able to cover it at this point. Whereas Tasmania is a great starting point. And like Ian mentioned too before, the great part of Tasmania is that all the power that comes from Tasmania is hydro or solar power, so that is truly a green hydrogen. There's no blend of coal or gas been burnt there to make the electricity to make the hydrogen. So yeah, we're sort of aiming towards sort of early next year to have something happening down there.
That's fantastic. Really exciting. I mean, I know there is hydrogen cars on the road in most states of Australia at the moment, but in more of a test capacity. Obviously, the refueling is one of the big issues. But to look at the heavy vehicles, where most of us believe the real potential for hydrogen is, to be launching those trucks is quite exciting. And hopefully something that you can bring back up to Queensland once you've got that trial working properly. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Thanks, Mike.
Terrific. Yeah. Somebody else I'll mention that's involved in this is Brian, and Brian Inglis is on the H2 cluster, or one of them here in Queensland, and he's just posted in the chat section that he's got a number of working groups that he's involved in here in Queensland, and so there is quite a lot. As it was one of the points that Mike made in that chat with Ruth, that there's quite a bit happening, that it can be easy to probably get a little bit despondent on the consistent run of bad news in terms of what's happening with our environment and the real need for change. But the good thing is that there's quite a lot happening, much more than you would imagine, and people are working towards it. So, Mike, you mentioned on that you were surprised once you got into it. And obviously, having a Minister for Hydrogen is a significant recognition of the fact that it's an important potential resource. Any other examples that you can point to that people may not be aware of what's going on?
Well, just, I mean, as a general comment, there was a lot of work being done by governments to look at the potential for hydrogen, investments in pilot plants, pilot studies, a lot of work behind the scenes with negotiations with other countries. And a lot of that wasn't being brought to the public attention. So, when I first started, I, didn't have a specific background in the hydrogen industry, and was not aware of it. But since then, I think there's been a lot of chatter, and hydrogen is a word that people start to hear on the television. Now the challenge is to educate the public about what it means, make sure we're talking about the right hydrogen, that it's not just being used as a catch-all to get people out of things. But I mean, an example that people may not be aware of is the Queensland government has worked with the plumbing industry. They've got a plumbing industry, I think it's Plumbing Industry Climate Action Centre at Beenleigh. It's a centre of excellence, and they put $20 million into it for training people in hydrogen.
Yes.
Twiggy Forrest, he's known for mining. He wants to produce massive amounts of green hydrogen. He can't get enough electrolyzers, so he's now investing $150 million in Gladstone to build his own electrolyzer factory. So there's some amazing stuff going on, that various amounts of publicity.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right, and thanks for giving us a few more examples there. I think that training aspect of it is going to become really critical. It seems to me that what we're doing with renewables is moving into a similar sort of boom to what the mining boom went through maybe 20 years ago, where there's a massive need for infrastructure, therefore a massive need for people that are trained in these areas. And the point that you made in the talk with Ruth is that it's not necessarily starting from scratch with a whole new career. It's what people are doing now, whether that's being in the trades of plumbing and electricians and or just heavy machinery use, perhaps engineering, all of the civil engineering, all of those sort of things, but putting some training over the top to make sure that they understand the subject they're dealing with, I suppose, and that can be quite smaller specific training. So I think it speaks to the online area very well.
Yeah, PricewaterhouseCoopers did a report a year or so ago. I think they were commissioned by the South Australian government, but it was actually a national survey of vocational needs for the hydrogen industry, and they indicated there was about 46, job roles that would be required for the hydrogen industry. And they basically said there'll be no new job roles, but each one of them will need incremental training in those areas. So, plumbers, they're used to making sure, pipes fit together and gas doesn't leak. But hydrogen's a slipperier gas than, methane or natural gas. So the fittings will need to be more specific and tighter. Gas leaks, you can't smell leaking hydrogen. So you'll need hydrogen detection systems. And so those things are very specific little bits of incremental training that, yes, it could easily lend themselves to online. And, the thing is, we're going to need a massive workforce. So we've got to get it out there quick. And this is not like the old days. This is not like solar panels is a great story about how the solar panel photovoltaic cells has grown and got cheaper over time, but that took 40 years. All our targets don't give us 40 years. So, everyone's got to realize we've got an 8-year window to halve our emissions. And, we just can't do it the old way. We're going to need every little bit of, hyper tuning we can to get people educated in time.
All right. That's great. Look, we're only got a short period of time. I didn't want to take up all day for this for people that have joined us, but I have got a couple of questions on the chat line. And Ross has asked about the problems with hydrogen for heavy transport being the issue of safety and its transfer and holding. Have you got any particular response to that, Mike?
I can't see Ross's specific question, but look, certainly there are some issues with hydrogen. Absolutely, it's either going to be liquefied at minus 253 degrees, or it's going to be under very high pressure, 7,000 psi. Doing those things in themselves use energy. So there's a huge logistical issue in moving hydrogen to the places where it's needed. I know I think it might be Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland government are rolling out a program now. They want to put 4 hydrogen refueling stations along the Pacific Highway, certainly from Melbourne to Sydney. I know in the first leg, as a trial, as a test, as a facilitator, I guess. There's no doubt there's challenges in using hydrogen, but at the moment, batteries. If you've got a heavy vehicle and you've got to put 6 tons of batteries in it, that's 6 tons of cargo you're not moving. And then if it takes a few hours to recharge the truck, that's valuable time for the trucking company, and it's already a low margin industry. So all these things will have a role. Yep.
I think that's a good segue into the next question, which was from Graham Yates. Thanks for your question, Graham. And he's asked, how long does it take to refuel hydrogen for cars? He's citing examples in California that it can take 30 to 40 minutes. And has that been improved? I
wasn't aware it could take 30 to 40 minutes. So no. I may have just learnt something myself, Graham. The claim is it's it's a 5 or 10 minute fill, just like LPG. Yes. Certainly, I mean, the police have a hydrogen vehicle, a Hyundai, running around Brisbane at the moment, and I've actually refueled that, and that certainly did take half an hour. But that's because the refueling station is being made on the cheap, and it runs at a lower pressure, and it runs off a bank of cylinders. So it's not what you would do commercially if you were filling cars,
Okay. That's interesting, because Tim has jumped in. So Tim has jumped into the chat saying that his understanding is 5 minutes for a Toyota Mirror.
Yes.
And so yes, but that your point there on the one that you experienced is valid, that it depends on the refueling station and how it's set up. And I suppose initially they're keeping it safe. The higher the pressure, the more the risk. So they probably try and find a medium ground.
I think it's more just a cost saving. You wouldn't build a refueling station with the infrastructure to refuel 20 cars an hour if you're only refueling 1 police car once a week. You use a cheaper version, and you wear the half-hour fill time.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Now, I did want to go back to Brian Inglis, who is in the H2 group here in Queensland, and he's posting up a couple of videos and things that might be of some interest. It's the opening of the centre that you were referring to before, actually, I think is the video that he's put up there. So yes, and that H2 group is well worth looking up if you're in Queensland and looking to engage in the hydrogen potential, and I think it's definitely worth doing, because it's just going to have to increase, really, isn't it? I think that as our time is short, we should probably just get a wrap-up statement from you, if you've got one, Mike, that you'd like to put forward on the hydrogen future for green hydrogen.
Well, in terms of workforce?
Yes.
Yeah. So, there's going to be a massive need to upskill people, to facilitate the hydrogen industry. There's going to be a lot of competition. Renewables will suck a lot of people away as well, like just photovoltaic cells, wind turbines, all the other infrastructure things that are going to have to be put in place. So there's going to be a real supply and demand struggle. And just going back to the point I made before, we can't rely on traditional means to do this and traditional policies. I mean, COVID was a good example of how when something's urgent, there are ways to fast track things, and governments need to be looking at how to fast track some of this, because the targets they've set require a much more rapid response than we've traditionally done.
That's an excellent point to make. The example of COVID, I hadn't thought of that, but yes, that presented a clear and present danger, and governments around the world did react, and we managed to deal with that and move through. So I think
Yes.
I'm going to take that as a very positive potential for what we can do about our need for more renewables.
And I did use the word fast track specifically. No corners were cut, but a lot of things were done in parallel. And ministers actually worked back to make decisions and didn't wait till Monday morning. And, you know, whatever had to be done to keep things moving along was done.
Good point. All right. I think as we did let people know that it would only be 30 minutes, we should wrap this up. But I really want to say thank you to everybody for attending. Thank you, Mike, particularly for being part of this today, and for the conversation with Ruth. And I, for one, have an optimistic outlook for where we're going on this. And I just appreciate the fact that we've got some smart people that are all involved, that are all working on it. So thank you once again.
Okay, thanks.
Bye all.